Alice Madness Returns 3D Platform Jumps and Dreams. Published on my website, accordionsprout.com, 31st of October, 2024. When I was a kid, I had a lot of dreams about falling. The most disturbing aspect of them, and even now, is that these falls never occurred in relation to a non-familiar environment, i.e. skyscrapers, cliffs, ladders, or liminal playground equipment. I was always falling from spaces that were in my own house. In one dream, I still recall vividly there was an emaciated girl hunched forward on a rock above some kind of waterfall that was pouring out of my roof and into my home. She turned to me, opened her mouth, mumbled something in dream speak, and I began to fall. The imagery of the lead up to this fall was nowhere near as emotionally troubling to me as the next part. I watched what I can only describe as my soul fall from the ceiling and collide with my body, which was, quote, sleeping. Because this was a dream, I never landed. I did wake up, however, to feel my body collide into the mattress. Now, this vaguely somnambulistic episode was one of at least a dozen similar dreams, but none of them ever had the same visual potency, or the lingering emotional and intellectual impression that I had watched myself outside of myself. I stopped having dreams about falling sometime in the second grade, and I suspect it was due to a new intellectual development that was occupying the circuits of my gray matter. Much like falling into oblivion, this new concern left me constantly stressed, frustrated, exhausted, and confused. This is to say, I stopped dreaming about falling and started dreaming about girls. This background material is important because it provides unusually important insight to 3D platforming video games, and because I'm finally writing something about the video game Alice Madness Returns. I'll be honest, this is terrifying and exciting. Seriously, I've been wanting to write something about this video game since I started this website, and now I've finally got the initiative, insanity, to do it. Trying to find something to write about this game isn't difficult for me, but what is difficult is limiting myself to just one topic. I could, probably, given the right amount of time, write a whole damn book about this game. Maybe one day I will. Before I gush too much, though, I need to cover the general background about when the game came out and what it's about. Alice Madness Returns was released for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Windows personal computers in North America 14th of June 2011, Europe 16th of June 2011, and in Japan 21st of July 2011. The game was the long-awaited sequel to American McGee's Alice, which established American McGee as a video game director. Before this game, McGee had worked for id Software, a small video game development company that I'm told made some pretty impressive and popular video games. One of them was about a shotgun, or had a shotgun, I think. I know for sure one of them had a nail gun. The Alice series was instantly iconic because the content of the games are macabre reimaginings of the novels Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. The setup for the first game is that Alice Little is in a comatose state following a house fire caused by the family cat, which resulted in her entire family being burned alive. Alice goes on a psychological journey through a now severely altered Wonderland where characters such as Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the Duchess, the Mad Hatter, and the Red Queen have become distorted monsters that are either trying to kill her or else keep her mired in survivor's guilt following the death of her family. By the end of the game, Alice eventually conquers her demons and is able to leave Rutledge Asylum, the final clip offering a hopeful vision that Alice will be happy. Obviously, this isn't what happens. Alice Madness Returns follows Alice sometime after she's been released from the asylum. She's now living in an orphan home tended by a psychiatrist named Dr. Angus Bumby, who is trying to help her forget the memory of the house fire. Alice refuses to forget and begins suffering hallucinations that lead her back to Wonderland, where a new malevolent force is warping Wonderland and destroying it piece by piece in the form of a screaming train that honestly resembles a Gothic cathedral right down to the stained glass windows. From here, Alice will navigate the realms of Wonderland, trying to determine what the train is, why it's destroying Wonderland, and trying to work her way back to the death of her family to determine if the cause of the fire was really because of the family cat and not some other bad actor. In terms of gameplay, Alice Madness Returns is an action shooter hack and slash video game with various puzzle, mini games, and, most important for this essay, 3D platforming. This is a genre I'm not unfamiliar with, but I'll be honest, I don't have a great amount of experience with. Considering the games that I've played in my life, most of them have been 2D platformer games, point-and-click interface, or else shooter games, both first and third person. Alice Madness Returns is, arguably, my main point of reference for this genre, partly because I spent so much time playing it, and then also because it's one of the few games in that genre that I've actually played to completion. In terms of design mechanics, 3D platforming video games are relatively self-explanatory. The player moves a 3D sprite character in and around various three-dimensional spaces and regions. Probably one of the best and popular examples would be Super Mario 64. Looking at that game for context, players control Mario as they navigate him around Princess Peach's castle and the different levels which are accessible through the paintings spread throughout the rooms. Levels are accessed by jumping into paintings. Early levels typically include wide open area with little to no environmental damage to players. For example, Bomb-Omb Plains is a wide open grass plain, no way for Mario to die by falling except if he drops off the side of tall cliffs. I'm going to interrupt this recording immediately and observe that that is a horrible sentence, and we're immediately going to stop this to try to figure out what I was trying to say. So, early levels typically include wide open area with little to no environmental damage to players. For example, Bomb-Omb Plains is a wide open grass plain, and right there I see what happened is, I was supposed to say, with no way for Mario to die by falling, except if he drops off the side of tall cliffs. Okay. Yeah, I just need to go back in and fix that. Hopefully by the time this video is, published, I will have that sentence corrected. Isn't this just fun? Anyway, likewise, enemies are scattered minimally and often in wide open areas that allow players an easy opportunity to learn navigating 3D space. As missions and levels are completed, however, the challenge increases in the form of more enemies, smaller platforms, and time between jumps is shortened, increasing the likelihood that the player will fall to their death and have to start over. Alice Madness Returns is a video game which explores a number of heavy themes: sexual exploitation, sexual violence, murder, emotional and psychological disassociation, mental illness, and emotional abuse, just to name a few. Obviously, none of these themes are going to be present in a traditional 3D platformer like Super Mario 64 or Spyro the Dragon. At least I don't think so. Then again, both of those games have an uncanny energy to them. Huh. What's important, however, is that these themes and elements are ever present in Alice. As Alice navigates the platforms, puzzles, and slides that make up the levels, the visual aesthetic of each level, apart from being distinct in their detail and execution, create regular, subtle allusions to Alice's ever-growing emotional turmoil. To wit, the second level of the game is a region known as Diluted Depths. The name is kind of a dead giveaway. Alice begins this level on a glacier looking for the mock turtle. The early part of this level has several low-intensity fight sequences, multiple secrets tucked away into corners, a new weapon to acquire, specifically the hobby horse, and then Alice arrives at Mock Turtle's ship, at which point an arguably great shoot-'em-up minigame begins. Once under the surface of the ocean, the platforming begins in earnest. All at once, the ground that Alice had been secure on begins to be broken up, and the player has to navigate jumping on and around jellyfish in the water that act as the platforms. Likewise, the enemy count increases, and players have to balance combat, both in terms of short and long-range attacks. Not only that, but as the level progresses, the spaces between jumps widen. Enemy NPCs become more frequent and difficult in their intensity, and health items become few and far between. From a design perspective, this is just natural growth. Levels of any video game, when done right, are about leading players into the game and showing them what is possible and then steadily increasing the challenge. There's an educational process to making good levels, and there isn't a level in Alice Madness Returns that doesn't follow this philosophy. The platforming naturally grows in challenge. And damn if they aren't fun as hell. Whether it's Hatter's Domain, Queensland, or the Dollhouse, The jumps in Alice require careful positioning and balancing of the slow descent made after each press of the action button. They're also incredibly fun to make, and even during the most tense moments of the game, there's a joy to moving Alice from platform to platform because of how well the controls of the game are made, not to mention the visual aesthetics of the jumps themselves. By the time I reach the end of Diluted Depths, I come away with a greater sense of confidence in my ability to navigate the space Alice is occupying. And that confidence translates perfectly into the rhetorical significance because this game is about building Alice's confidence. Alice is being manipulated by multiple individuals, both in Wonderland and in real life. The characters Alice meets are never a source of direct information, no matter what she does for them, and in certain levels, this is beyond frustrating. Anyone who's trekked through the entirety of Caterpillar's level knows the sheer agony that is the conclusion of that sequence because, after arguably the longest sequences of fights and jumps, Alice derives no clarification of what's happening to her or Wonderland. Instead, she's just handed a pompously mysterious riddle/non-riddle, and then the next level begins. I note that several players of the game have bemoaned the length of the game, arguing that it stretches levels out to a point that they become cartoonish exercises in repetition. These players complain that levels in Alice Madness Return are long and then end far too quickly, or that levels become a sequence of jump, fight, jump, fight, jump, fight ad nauseum. With respect to these players, I get it. And I'll be honest, I thought the same the first time I ever played Alice Madness Returns. Replaying the game now, multiple times, I no longer have that impression. Or at the very least, it doesn't bother me anymore. The story of Alice is a woman who's lost everything and is continually being strung along by people who don't have her best interests at heart. Even the benevolent people in her life, like her nanny, are no real help to her, and the ones who are supposedly trying to help are often manipulating her for selfish or, frankly, evil reasons. It makes sense rhetorically, then, that the ends of levels are not about finding an obvious solution. Trauma, and moving through and living through trauma, is not a straight road, and sometimes it takes years, decades even, to fully process it. And I know this because I, like everybody else on this planet, have had to navigate trauma. Whether it's the religious trauma I experienced as a kid or the grief of emotional abuse experienced from a previous partner, I know firsthand that trauma does not end with a flagpole, a small brick castle, and fireworks, depending on your score. The reality is a winding path that often leads nowhere. And, just like Alice Madness Returns, trauma is about navigating the ground I stand on. Several 3D platforming games have used the genre for entertainment purposes only, which is fine. People often play video games like they consume just about all forms of media because they want to enjoy themselves. I play Super Mario 64 because I enjoy the physicality of the character, and I enjoy playing Alice Madness Returns because the jumps Alice makes are fun to navigate and they're visually spectacular. It's an entertaining video game that I've played regularly, entirely because the platforming is fun. What makes Alice unique as a 3D platformer is the way it blends a concern for design with the rhetorical meat of its story. Moving Alice from platform to platform is not just an exercise in 3D spatial jumps. Alice is a woman floating above psychological ruin and oblivion, and each jump is a reminder that her mental state is fragile and susceptible to ruin. If I fail a jump, Alice will fall and her character splinters into an explosion of butterflies that also triggers a sound file of the voice actors screaming. This death, apart from being the necessary failure clue to players, is also an important reminder that failure for Alice is not just dying. It's worse than that. Failure for Alice means the death of Wonderland. It means failure to solve the mystery of her family's death. It means failure to prevent the manipulation and sadism that is befalling other children like her, and it means she will plummet back into insanity. From jellyfish to jellyfish, gear to gear, mahjong tiles to mahjong tiles, cards to cards, and finally broken boards to broken boards warped by an absent caretaker, Alice is moving from what little ground she has to try and build herself back up to being whole again. The platformer as a genre of video games is about keeping a character's feet on the ground as long as they can in spite of the circumstances they find themselves in. While there are great video games like Super Mario 64 that employed this structure for the sake of entertaining motion, Alice Madness Returns is one of the few platformers I'm aware of that took that dynamic and molded it to become an incredible design structure and a powerful rhetorical tool for exploring the trauma response. Alice is trying and fighting to keep her feet on the ground as long as she can, because the alternative is falling. And unlike the dreams I had as a child, Alice's fall won't end in a strange memory. It will just end. Joshua Jammer Smith, 31st of October, 2024. Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, hey, first off, as always, thank you. Like, seriously, thank you. Over and over again. Like, I can't say thank you enough. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you decided to listen to me, and honestly, I think that's pretty cool. Whoever you are, you're cool. You're awesome, and not enough people tell you that. Seriously, thank you for listening. When it comes to all we have in this life, it's our time and our choice, and you gave me your time by making a choice, and that means a lot to me. Now let's go over the necessary claptrap. This is YouTube after all, so please remember to like, share, and subscribe. It helps me, it helps the channel, and all that noise. It really does, though, because if nothing else, it lets me see, hey, people are discovering these videos and they're enjoying them, or they want to enjoy them more, or I don't know. Please, just like, share, and subscribe if you don't mind terribly, but as always, your choice. No pressure either way. And then likewise, too, if you would like to support me in terms of buying groceries, paying rent, or even just being able to, afford some more video games, there is a Patreon for this and my art and all that other stuff. It's patreon.com/jammerdraws, but you can also find a link in the description section below. Now, this is one of the longer form essays, so I'm going to try to not spend too much time talking about this. You'll note there were a couple of instances here where I caught some grammatical errors, and I'll be honest, there's a number of sentences in this essay that have real structural problems, but I'm working without an editor, and I'm also trying to just be as honest as I possibly can when it comes to these essays, and just, this is me, I make mistakes. Sometimes I try to just keep them in to make sure I remind myself that I'm human, but there are a couple here that are just outright egregious. But far more importantly, this is the first essay I've written about Alice Madness Returns, and that's important because when I think about the mid to late aughts, actually no, excuse me, this said it came out in 2011, if I actually bothered to consult my original actual research. Yeah, 2011. When I think about that time, I think a lot about Red Dead Redemption, and I think a lot about Alice Madness Returns. I played both of those games a ton. But I haven't written anything about Alice yet. I suspect, possibly because I have far more of an emotional connection to that game than I do with Red Dead. Although I have written a couple of stuff about Red Dead Redemption 1, and I've also written a bunch of stuff about RDR2, so keep your eyes open for that. But I've been dying to write something about it, because there is nostalgia for it, but there's also just a real appreciation for the narrative depth of this game, for the content of this game, for the aesthetic of this game. After Silent Hill 2, there probably isn't a game I think about as much as Alice Madness Returns. And I will be completely transparent here too. I would like to see this game make some kind of comeback. Obviously, this game is well over a decade old at this point. There's no way it's going to suddenly become the number one game in the world, and it doesn't have to. But right now, just playing this game is an uphill battle because it is not available on the PlayStation Network at all. It's available on Steam, but anybody who has a Steam account and plays it knows that it is really buggy. And when I say buggy, I mean I will regularly have to restart my computer just to get it to run. And that is beyond frustrating. And then after that, there's tons of small little glitches in the code where NPCs will just sort of pop into existence and disappear, or suddenly I will fall through the floor, and usually just quitting the game, opening it up again is enough to get it to work. But still, there's a maintenance issue with this. And then, of course, too, because I'm completely biased, American McGee has been working for years to get the third game off the ground. And, well, he recently, as in last year, made an announcement that he pitched the game to EA, who owns the license, and they said no. And I don't swear on this channel, but when I say I was mad, I was mad. And in fact, a lot of people are mad. This is a great intellectual property that means a great deal to so many people and has the potential to do so much for the medium of video games. And it's not necessarily being forgotten, but it's being left to just slowly deteriorate, almost like Alice herself. And it's tragic and it's frustrating. So this video and this lead up to it has really been my way of kind of, I guess, planting some kind of intellectual flag in the dirt and saying, hey, Alice Madness Returns is great. And I have written 3 essays as of this recording now about it. 2 of them will be coming out in 2025. I'm going to try to write some more in the coming weeks, coming months, years, what have you. Just as long as I'm writing and talking about video games, I will always say, please, 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 find a way to play Alice Madness Returns and play American McGee's Alice. You can get that online for free, honestly. There's some websites that I cannot legally name that host it, that you can download it and play it on your PC. And you should, because it's beautiful. This whole game series is beautiful. And again, this video exists, one, to explore 3D platforming dynamics in a really great horror game that was published in 2011, but it's also a way of saying, thank you so much for listening. I tremendously appreciate it. Please, 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 go play Alice Madness Returns, because this game rules. Later, y'all.